welcome to this edition of Corner Gallery. I am your host, Romero Starks, and we have another photography episode for you. Today we have Donald McKenna as well as Greg Barth with us. Gentlemen, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Doing great, thank you.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you all as well. So, as you can see, we've got some beautiful pictures behind us. Let's start with the older days. What got you into photography? Whoever wants to take over first.
I started in high school. Grew up in a big family. We didn't even have a camera, and became interested in high school and had an aptitude for it, and just kind of picked up from there, really.
Interesting.
My dad bought a Canon A1 and went to work, and he handed me the camera on the way out the door and said, "Figure out how this works by the time I get home." I'm messing with it, and then later on I figured out that there was a way to make a living with it, and went from there.
No, I guess that's simple enough instruction from Dad. You better figure it out. Okay.
Go at it.
So, what really, obviously you start off, you're not, instantly just a great photographer taking pictures like these. So what was the learning curve like as you were younger and growing towards this habit or this career now? How did you start figuring out, this is how I should be taking these, or this is what I want to really have as a focal point?
Well, I have always, when I was younger, I paint, drew. I kind of thought everybody made art. And as you grow a little older, you begin to realize that that's not the case. So, but again, I'll go back to high school, and during study hours and classes, I would go hide out in the library and just page through art books and things like that, and began to be drawn more to the photography books.
Gotcha. How about yourself?
I started with, in high school, I was on the school newspaper, the photography editor, or whatever, which wasn't a very high threshold at that point, but you got to take a lot of pictures.
Right.
And repetition, you've just kind of, you learn a little bit, and then I decided to pursue that in college, and, 4-year degree, so that way, it was just something I kept working on. It wasn't a burning desire, it just kind of happened, I guess, on its own.
Right, okay, I got you. So, looking at the pictures behind us, obviously there's plenty of color. On the last episode, the photographers we had with us, they liked a lot of black and white work. So how did you all personally decide, I lean a little more towards color? Because that's a back and forth, I think, argument in photography, painting, all of that type of stuff. People really, teeter that line.
Well, I know for myself, I started early enough that black and white was just, it was a simpler means of introducing students to photography. And color was much more technically demanding at that time. It still is in some ways, but with the digital printing and cameras, it has become much more user-friendly. I still do black and white, but I do color. 95% of what I do now is color.
Gotcha. How about you, Greg?
I kind of go back and forth. This particular work being, at amusement park, it's going to be bright. There's a lot of color that can be used. So I kind of stuck with it on these. But I have that debate all the time, and I shoot everything color sometimes with the intention of making it black and white at this point with digital. So, at some point you look at the work and you figure out what fits it better. So,
got you. So, since we are talking about color and the pictures behind us, why don't we take a second to talk about what these are about? Obviously, Greg, you mentioned this is an amusement park. So, what was that whole day about? Did you make a day of taking pictures at the fair or wherever this was?
What I did is I bought a season pass to Six Flags. And just went out there and just used my pass, and went out in the afternoons at a certain time I was shooting because I went out looking for a certain quality of light, and just went out and took pictures. And it was more of therapy, I guess, than trying to put together a body of work, and it wound up looking pretty good together, and here we sit.
That is a resourceful way to use a season pass. I mean, that's smart though. And then so I guess a lot of planning goes into that then. Like you said, you wanted a certain time of day to get the certain lighting and all of that.
I live fairly close to Six Flags, so it wasn't,
Gotcha.
it was, it worked out time-wise and all that. But I tell you, Six Flags security looks at you kind of curious when you walk through with a big honking camera with a big honking lens. So
I bet.
They gave me the look a few times, but, they never stop, so.
Gotcha. So, Don, how about this one here?
Well, this is pretty abstract, and I typically don't work quite that abstractly, but it was, I mean, it sounds so simple, but it was just something that caught my eye as I was driving by it. It's in Jefferson City,
Okay.
and obviously they had torn some sort of structure down. I don't know that it was a gas station or something, but the first thing that that caught my eye was the color blue, and I just pulled over, got out, walked around, and took a look at it, and decided that there was something there. And same thing with Greg. I mean, when I decide to shoot, there's a lot of equipment that gets brought. This is was shot with a 4x5 view camera, and that's the kind of cameras that you throw over your head, and it's pretty old school stuff. But it takes a little while to set up. Takes a little while to decide what you're going to shoot, and so it's a slower, more contemplative process that I just like. It isn't so much I have a nostalgia thing for film or anything like that. It's really, I just enjoy working with the camera and composing on a large ground glass.
Gotcha. So, at what point did photography transition from something that, I kind of like to do this, to, you know what, I could really do this on a more professional level and be featured in galleries? When did that, when did that page turn and the light bulb go off?
Well, for me, I mean, I was just taken with it so completely that I kind of thought, well, this is something I was going to try to do almost from the beginning, really. Once I kind of, I mean, it satisfied me both creatively, and it was an enjoyable thing to do, and in some ways it was kind of an escape in some ways too, because you do sort of remove yourself while you're photographing from what's going on around you. I mean, you're involved, but you do have to sort of begin to back away a little bit in order to make photographs of things.
Right. Greg, how about yourself?
It was more gradual for me. I think it was just like, you do one step and then the next step you just kind of get more immersed in it as you go along. Now it's gotten to a point where it's what do I do for fun? Well, I go to a gallery opening or something like that. So I guess at this point in my life, it's kind of sucked me in all the way. but it was a piecemeal job. So.
Gotcha. So obviously, we both had you all featured in the Boyle Art Gallery here at Lindenwood. What was that like to be able to get not only students but some local people out and get to do it on a college level, I guess I should say?
Well, it's a beautiful gallery space. You have just a wonderful space, and I mean, for me, photography, even in the digital age now, it still remains a print medium. For me, the final step in the creative process is preparing a print, putting it on the wall. So that is, it's rewarding, and I showed a couple of pieces, 5 pieces up here that I haven't shown. Well, all 10 of them had not been shown before, but 5 of the 10 were pieces that I normally don't show that kind of. I don't shoot a whole lot of people pictures anymore,
right.
And I do, but not like I used to. And so it was an opportunity for me to show some work that but might not have seen the light of day for a while.
Right. So how about you?
I got an opportunity to go back through. I had the body of work, and I'd shot it a couple years ago, and I got to revisit it and go through and pull out some images and look at it with fresh eyes, which is, it's, and I think I reprinted about half of them, I guess, and pulled new images out. And I just kind of surprised myself, and it's always good to kind of re-examine where you had been and kind of, where I'm going visually as an artist, I guess. Like I said, Don said, the gallery is fantastic. It's almost kind of like a wedding reception, those things where you're meeting all these people
right.
and you're afraid you're going to miss somebody and all that. But no, it's always a good time.
Gotcha. So I'm going to go right back to you. I'm going to let you start with this one. How do you sit down and decide? I know with we had the other artists that came through that had paintings, quilts. John Troy kind of sat with them, who's our producer, kind of sat with them and picked some out. Did he do that also with you, or did you kind of have more independence with this and say, you know what, these are the type of ones that I want to really showcase in this gallery?
He pretty much said, he looked at our work and said, I trust you, bring what you want. I think, and not speaking for the whole group, but I brought more work than I anticipated them needing, so they could, you kick a few out if they didn't want, or whatever. They wound up hanging it all. So I guess we were all on the same page. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was a very similar experience. We presented some work, and it was just accepted. And we're mature artists. We've been doing this a while, so we have pretty strong bodies of work. I return to certain subject matter. I don't necessarily work on projects per se anymore, but it's one of those things where, as many years as I've been doing it, I have bodies of work that I continue to add to, and even within those frameworks, there are smaller, more kind of categorized portfolios within that work.
I'd also like to know, what other galleries have you been featured in? I imagine you've done probably some really big things, seeing as, like you said, you both have been doing this long enough by now that it's not like it's just something new, and the Boyle Art Gallery was your first exhibition. So what other places have you been featured?
Well, when you say big things, I mean, sort of big things. I mean,
We're being humble about it.
Yeah. I've been featured online with some gallery spaces and online exhibitions. I was in a show just in Kansas City. I'll be in another show in Kansas City coming up here in a couple of weeks, actually. But showed in Omaha. But it's all. It's university-based, smaller galleries. It's not exactly the big time yet, but it's still a pretty rewarding experience to have somebody be interested enough in what you're doing to want to give you an opportunity to show it.
Right.
I've kind of taken a break from doing shows, and this is my first one back in a while. I did a solo show out of the Foundry, not terribly long, I guess 6 years ago, something like that. Art St. Louis, I've shown there a few times and stuff like that. Basically local stuff. I haven't done a whole lot outside of the area. But.
Gotcha. Well, see, that kind of answers my next question. I was going to ask you about traveling a little bit. You obviously mentioned that you have a show coming up in Kansas City. So have you been able to go pretty far out of the Missouri area, or do you also kind of try to stay within the state?
No, I mean, I've had an opportunity to, I've submitted work to jury shows and have shown really from coast to coast and over the years. But when the opportunity presents itself. But, by the same token, by the time I get a couple of pieces accepted, that's a pretty big piece to ship. So, I mean, there are limitations to that. But I've had an opportunity to show in, a number of galleries from nationwide, really. And in fact, as I was involved in a show that went to China, and so that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm sure that was a nice trip.
It was, yeah. It was a lifetime experience, no question about it. We had through the International Photography Hall of Fame, we had a reciprocal arrangement with a group in Nanjing, China, and we showed. We went over there, traveled, showed. They came over here and showed, and then did a tour of the country over here. It was enjoyable. Yeah.
So, Greg, you mentioned you like to stay a little local, and you haven't really done that many exhibitions in a long time. Is there a reason you like to stay local?
For me, I'm a commercial photographer by day, kind of a fine artist at night. So for me, it's not the focus of what I'm doing per se. It's more of a, more entertainment value, shall we say, than the crux behind it.
Okay. So it's just something that, if the opportunity comes along, okay,
it's
sure.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's more of it's not the same, not to make a pun out of it. It's not the focus of it. So Be
I see
here
what
all
you did
week.
there.
Where's the trap set when you need it?
Well, you mentioned that you got to go to California and do a little shooting, so I imagine most of your traveling is when you're just doing your personal shooting that you like to do then, since it's not for exhibitions. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was fortunate enough. We had a family vacation, and I just scheduled a few extra days, and I went to Joshua Tree by myself, driving around the desert in some rental car. Spent 48 hours, 800 miles, and 800 images, and now I'm just kind of going through that and seeing if I can pull yet another body of work out of it. But it's I think you used the word therapeutic earlier. It's kind of that. It's just, it's a lot of fun just being able to put whatever else is going on out of your mind and just look for things that are interesting, whether it be what's going on in the image, the way the shapes all interconnect, colors and all that, and you can just focus on that and not have to worry about anything else.
Gotcha.
Well, it's funny. He talks about that, and this was made on one of my Walmart tours. And what I do is I get permission to go out for a few days, and I literally sleep on Walmart parking lots with all the big truckers, and I just sleep in my car. It's a little SUV, and I'm up with the sun and start heading down. I have a direction, but it can change at a moment's notice.
Right.
The difference between Don's technique and my technique is my wife has hotel points, so I stay at Marriott's.
Ah, okay. She's got parking lots, you've got Marriott's.
There you go.
Got you. So obviously, I assume then you've got a camera on you at all times because you never know what might stick out and make a good picture, right?
Yeah, I mean, above and beyond your phone, I carry a small little, it produces a very high quality file so that I can produce a print this big from it, but it's something that I can put in my pocket.
Right.
And as opposed to this camera that I shot this picture with, big 4x5 view camera, big tripod, and yeah, but I don't shoot just willy-nilly all the time. I'm typically, if something has to catch my eye.
So there's again, no pun intended, a focus for most of the pictures you take. It's not just, I saw this and it's good. You really wanted to get that picture.
I did that plenty, but I don't find myself doing that much anymore. I just, I'm more, I don't know, maybe you just, you develop a certain level of connoisseurship that I know what I'm looking for.
Right.
And as I said, I don't necessarily work on any one project at any time, but I've got several projects that I continuously shoot to kind of just add to those bodies of work.
Right. So Greg, you mentioned the family vacation. I assume a lot of the times when you're on vacation yourself or with your family, those are little opportunities for you to get in some extra shots that you wouldn't normally get.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something different. You were saying about having a camera with you all the times. I don't, because my general running around and on a daily, day-to-day basis, I've kind of mined all those nuggets after, and there's not a lot to be gained from that at that point. But something new is always, visually, you want to see different stuff. At least I do.
Right.
So.
And I imagine, too, just another traveling tidbit, when you went to China, you had to, there's so much going on there. It's not your normal
you're right.
surrounding. I imagine you had to get plenty of beautiful things there.
Well, everything. The proverbial culture shock. The crowds. There are a lot of people who, in the big cities, there were a lot of people did speak some English. You were able to get by. Certainly, while we were there as an organized group, we had handlers, people that led us along, and there was an official day. A friend and I, another photographer, we would go out before the official day started, though, and we would start shooting by 5 or so in the morning, and just kind of be out in the neighborhoods. Right. And that. I picked up a lot of stuff doing it. Otherwise, everybody was sort of being directed toward the same thing. I never felt like I was being restricted, but you were always being guided and observed.
Got you. So obviously, photography isn't just something you're doing 24/7 nonstop. You have lives. You might even have day jobs. What are some of the things that you do in your free time when you're not out taking pictures or working on something? I'll start with you because I want to get back to the international.
That is his day job.
That is your day job. Well,
But it's different. Shooting commercially, essentially when I'm taking a photograph commercially, I'm basically trying to sell a product.
right.
I want somebody to see all the facets of some product, or the advantages of using it, or how it's going to make you feel, or something along those lines. The art side is a different ballgame. That being said, I have interest outside of all that. I like to go biking, sailing, whatever, stuff like that. But and family, 2 kids, all that stuff.
Right.
So yeah.
So photography is his life. And
He is still a bona fide commercial shooter. I've retired.
Call please, I need the work.
That's right. Yeah.
well, in that case, I'd love to talk to you about the International Photography Hall of Fame. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Tell me some more about that. What do you do?
I volunteer with the organization. It's about a 51-year-old organization, the International Photography Hall of Fame. It's kind of to be located in St. Louis, it seems like a kind of a pretentious name, but there's probably 6,000 images in the collection, all sorts of cameras and advertising and periodicals, ephemera, just a lot of stuff within the organization that they have collected over time, and the role I've assumed about 2 or so years ago as I began helping them curate their shows and hang their shows, and that's sort of where I concentrate. What I concentrate on now is that I did help them organize their prints, so that I've got a pretty good feel for what was in the collection, and there's some world-class photographs within that collection.
Mm-hmm. And what are, if any, are the big exhibitions you're working on right now?
Well, right now there is a Vivian Maier exhibition, The Lost Voice of Photography, I think is what the name is. But it's going to be up through May, about 68 images. We had 70 to select from. 2 of them I just chose not to hang. They didn't fit quite as well. And there's 50 black and white, and I think 18 color up. So it's a lot of of her work. It wasn't being showed for a while because there was some legal action, some that kind of held people up, and some of the people that had organized shows, they were not able to fulfill those, and so this is one of the first shows in a while that has actually been hung, and it's a pretty interesting show. It's a remarkable body of work when you consider the backstory on who Vivian Maier was and how this all came about.
St. Louis is very lucky to have it. If you get a chance to go see it and you're interested in photography, you should take that opportunity.
Well, I will definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's well worth your time.
Interesting. So you said you've got several projects that you're kind of working on, but nothing in particular. You, on the other hand, Greg, show every now and then, here and there. Are there any exhibitions that you got your eye on or hoping to maybe get into soon, aside from the Kansas City one you mentioned earlier? Any other ones that you're looking forward to maybe getting into?
No, I don't have anything on in the future that I'm like really concentrating on. What will happen is I'll just be kind of going down one of the rabbit holes online and find some sort of either a show or a particular curator or somebody who's you would like to kind of catch their eye, and so I might submit some work to something like that, but I don't have anything that I'm really looking to get into right now.
Right, Greg. I just imagine with 800 photos, you said, right? 800 photos. I just gotta imagine that you gotta want to show something in there. There's just so much.
Right now, I'm really just trying to get back in the game, so to speak, a little bit, and at the end of the day, I just want to have the work. So I'm trying to work on that side right now. Not really focus where it's going to wind up. Trying to find, what's worth saying with my work, that type of thing, one of those artist existential questions or whatever, but really just enjoying doing the work at this point, and we'll look for a home for it later.
You guys are just so good with the flow about it. Just, oh, I'll take some pictures, and
Yeah.
if I get in a show, sure. If I don't, I'm just enjoying taking my pictures. That is
Well,
amazing
yeah,
to me.
Being turned down happens. So
Just gotten used to it. Just,
just kind of okay. You just roll with it. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, I've had pieces. In fact, I had one piece in a show down at the Spiva Art Gallery in Joplin, Missouri. It took a prize down there, and that was wonderful. It took a second place. I sent it to another one within a year or something like that, and it didn't even get into the show. So there you go. It's all up to the juror.
You kind of have to take your ego out of it a little bit, because it depends on the guy who's picking the pictures.
Right.
If they like lingerie shots, I don't have lingerie shots. It's not going to happen. It's
Right.
that simple.
Got you. So one other thing I wanted to touch on, you mentioned you have 2 kids. Do you have any kids, Don?
I do. I have 4.
So is that something that has maybe become a family habit with photography? Have your kids taken any interest in photography?
My son is a very talented photographer. He is also doing video work, and he's involved in a little different level. He does not regard printmaking as important as I do, a step in the creative process. But he's got a good eye, and I certainly want to encourage him to pursue that. And then my daughters are all have been painting and making creative work ever since they were small children.
Right. So that artistic gene is just flowing through the family. You mentioned you started with painting and stuff.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I can remember just making stuff my whole life.
Right. So, Greg, how about your family? Have your children
Not
taken
really.
any interest?
It's always, oh, Dad, take this picture. It's never,
Right.
I'm going to take it.
I want to take it. Yeah,
my daughter finally decided she was going to take over one of my old cameras when I was cycling through equipment, but hasn't used it a whole lot yet. So,
Interesting.
So.
Well, you always wonder that stuff because, as fathers, a lot of stuff you do, children kind of pick up after. So you always wonder when it comes to artistic habits, do the kids start picking that up too? And sometimes, you've got the kids that follow right in the footsteps and they all want to get involved. And you got the other kids who are like, oh, that's Dad's thing, that's cool. But, it's not for me. So it's just always interesting for me personally to hear about it.
They're all smarter than me, so that I don't worry about. I'm sure they're all going to find their way. A couple of teachers, one in the hotel industry, and like I said, my son seems to be, cobbling a living together through his camera. So.
Got you. So just really quickly, because we've only got a few minutes left here, if you would say that you've just gotten one thing from photography that's helped you as a person to grow or through life, what would you say that is? If that's too hard hitting for a couple minutes, I don't know.
I mean, it's certainly. I mean, photography has been terribly. It has been one of the most important things in my life until I had children. But if I gained anything, maybe self-respect.
Interesting, Greg.
I think it's just the enjoyment factor out of it. Just going off and taking photographs. That joy itself is the big takeaway for me. Everything else is kind of secondary. It's making the image.
You guys are just too cool for me. Too calm and relaxed. Right, genuinely.
And you were the only person who's ever said that to me.
Well, I genuinely appreciate you stopping by today. It was a great time talking to you.
It was our
great
pleasure.
Conversation. So thank
it was
you.
wonderful. We again appreciated the opportunity to show at the gallery. It was wonderful.
Sir. Well, that is all we have for today's episode of Corner Gallery. So thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.